All right, welcome back into the road to retirement. I'm Tony Marlette Jr. at Brookside Financial. Joining you today, not joining us today, is Tony Shore over at Gradient, but we do have Zach Padden, our estate planning attorney, in-house as well. So thanks for joining us today, Zach.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, anytime. A lot of what Tony and I do on this show, besides make fun of Chris, is talk about how financial and legal works together. I know you and I have done a lot of that. We've done a lot of that with Chris, and you and I make the joke that me plus you equals one Chris.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, clients sometimes realize that when Chris goes into a meeting, he's like talking about all these different areas. And then I'll be like, hey, let me grab Tony. And then all of a sudden we're tag teaming it and helping clients. So it works out. Some people like having two different people, the two different guys approach. And
Yeah.
some people really just like having Chris.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And I've been reading a lot, and you and I have talked about it before. And really, we talk about it a lot here about how, if say you're just doing financial planning or you're just doing estate planning, you're missing out on you're missing out on a big piece of the puzzle. So we talk about doing all that in one piece, doing all that in-house. A lot of obviously what I do revolves around financial planning, and we put that together. But a lot of times, if we're not looking at estate planning, if we're not looking at how assets are titled or where they're supposed to go or what the purpose of it is, or we're missing a piece, aren't we?
Yeah. And a lot of times clients come in and they think stuff's set up right. They're like, oh, yeah, I did a will. Well, they did it 30 years ago. Or, yeah, I set up a beneficiary. Well, it could be an ex-girlfriend. It could be an ex-wife. You don't
You
know
think
who
maybe
it is.
I'm the beneficiary on somebody's account from like 25 years ago, and maybe they don't know it yet, and
That'd be a
I'm gonna
nice thing to happen.
no, but in all honesty, that stuff does happen, and we've seen it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, people don't think about updating this stuff. It's out of sight, out of mind. And I tell people after you do an estate plan, put this away for a couple years, then you pull it back out and look at it again because things change.
Yeah.
And with financial planning, I feel like I'm not an expert on it, but it seems like people need to be always checking and thinking about what's the next best move for them.
So what do you think is involved in like a good estate plan, even if it's not like the Rolls-Royce estate plan? Uh, what do you think is involved, and does it? I mean, does it? I think we've seen it does depend too on what people are looking to protect and what they're looking to do.
Yeah, I think depending on your age, it's definitely going to be different. But for like most of our clients who are getting closer to retirement, they're thinking about succession planning. They're thinking about how their kids are going to take this money, grow, who they want to leave it to, whether it's charities or family. And I think a good estate plan, though, does bring in the financial piece because you got to understand what money they have, how it's going to be used, and where it's going to go. Because a lot of people think their will takes care of it all. And you and I both know a will doesn't avoid probate. It just tells the court where everything's going to go. So people forget that piece.
So when people talk about probate, Chris and I did a seminar on this about a little over, oh, it's probably about a year ago now. When people talk about probate, what are some misconceptions?
I think one of the bigger misconceptions is that the court's taking all these fees. It's a percentage of assets is what the court sets lawyers' fees at for probate, and people think that everything's just going to go quick and smoothly. It's just a lot of paperwork you got to get through. There's timelines, there's places for creditors. People are scared of probate, and there are times probate's good. But for the average person, you want to keep everything private, out of probate, just to get it smooth to your family.
So that's what I was going to say too. Probate, it's gotten a bad reputation. Is it because it's not private, and I mean it takes a while? Are those some of the?
Yeah, I mean, it's the cost. So, I mean, it's your money already. So, if you have a checking account with $100,000 in it, you're going to lose 5 to 8 grand from probate. So, you're throwing money away when all you need to do is have some kind of estate plan set up and account set up the correct way. So that's one of those things where it's not rocket science here, but you got to think and do the right planning.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting pieces of this, that when I first started getting in tune to like the estate planning side of things, was the estate or the trust or whatever it is can own different types of accounts and even property like a house and a car, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people will put their house, different accounts, and stuff inside your trust, and they own that. There are certain trusts that will help protect those assets, and some that are just used for probate avoidance, giving it to your beneficiaries over time. And a lot of people didn't realize, though, like you're right, bank accounts can be held by the trust, your house, all this stuff, and then you still can maintain control over these assets. People get scared when stuff just says something after their name or not directly in their name. But
Right.
again, you have access and control over these items. It's just a nice tool to protect your money.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We've seen it where people think, okay, well, my trust is going to own this. That means I have no access or no control. That's obviously not the case at all. Otherwise, we wouldn't be recommending that people do it, and people wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who come in, they don't know what they want. They think they're set up correctly. And I mean, you sat on these meetings before with me where they're like, oh, everything's set up. And then we start going through and looking, does their financial accounts have stuff set up correctly? No. Is their house titled the way they think it is? No. So for a lot of people, it's a shock, I think, about what actually is right with what they have and what isn't. And people just need to review it. Even if you're not wanting to move forward with something, at least go out there and figure out what's going to
Sure.
happen.
Right. Yeah, so when we're doing financial planning and when we're taking inventory of everything everybody has, even if I'm say making a presentation and saying, okay, this is what you should do with your accounts. This is what your income plan should look like. This is what your asset map is going to look like. We take into consideration, having these accounts and getting the appropriate type of account opened, but also making sure that it's titled correctly, whether the trust is to be the beneficiary. And there's different ways. If you're not doing that, especially the further along you are, I mean, even if you're in your 30s and you're starting out and maybe you have a young family or you're just getting into your career, again, you don't need to have the top of the line package. There's different packages for different needs, but this all should kind of go hand in hand with financial planning, though.
Yeah. And at my old firm I was at, we did estate planning as well. And we didn't have an in house financial advisor. So we would get calls from financial advisors all the time, it's like, hey, this person needs an estate plan. And part of the issue then would be we're trying to relay information here, there, and everywhere instead of, well, let me bring them into the meeting and we're all on the same page.
Right.
So, I mean, that's one of those benefits I think that we're seeing and a lot of our clients do see is we know exactly what the other side's doing, which I've never experienced anywhere else.
Yeah, and I can tell. I've mentioned it before too. This goes for the legal side and on the tax side, even. The biggest thing I would have to do in previous roles was, I can't answer that tax question too much detail. I got to refer you out to your tax advisor. I can't answer that estate planning question. I got to refer you out to an estate planning attorney. Or the thing that Chris has talked about before, the worst is, having somebody go it alone and try to do, an online estate plan where, some of the online stuff has its advantages and has its places. But for something like that, it just a mistake becomes very costly, I guess.
Yeah, and we've seen the documents people can use online. There are some great ones. I'm not going to say some aren't good,
Right.
but there are ones that aren't set up for Ohio. They don't have the correct witnesses. They aren't done the right way, and people come in and expect it to be correct. And that becomes a problem because they think what they did was perfect, and you can't tell them otherwise because Google told them it was right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And as far as referring out, I've always thought that, you refer somebody out for something, I think you run a big risk of losing that client. unless it's somebody that you're pretty established with. If you're just getting to know somebody, say if I'm just getting to know somebody on the financial planning side, where we've had a couple of conversations, maybe for me to refer them out for taxes or estate planning, who's to say that tax advisor or that estate planning attorney doesn't have a financial person of their own? So I think that it's a good way to coordinate services. Plus, we know I'm not giving some stranger information. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to Chris, and we're going through things that way. It's a lot more safe.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times if you do come in here, you would see that it's a team approach. It's if we start seeing we're going to need financial planning, we're bringing in a financial advisor to come and sit with you to then understand your concerns. If your concerns then rely on taxes, we're bringing in a tax professional right then and there to get you where you need to be. So it's not like we're referring you out to somebody and it's like, hey, go see them in 3 to 4 weeks or something.
Right.
We're getting you answers as quick as we can.
Yeah. What do you think are some mistakes that you see when, like, people, if they just have a beneficiary on an account, what do you think is, first of all, do we see that often where people do not have beneficiaries, do you think? And then secondly, if we're looking at setting up an estate plan and a financial plan at the same time, you mentioned before, a lot of times people don't have everything lined up as much as they think you do. What are some of those mistakes that you see?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is people think they have beneficiaries on accounts, like you said, but they don't. So, like checking accounts, savings accounts, they don't ask you when you're setting those up, hey, who's your beneficiary? Where your 401k, stuff like that, usually it says right on there, who's the beneficiary of this account. And when you set that up early on, it might not be the same person. So that's always a concern we do see. But I think one of our biggest issues with estate planning is they want to do what their friend did. Well, my friend did this trust, or my friend just did a will. Well, your friend and you are not in the same status. You don't have the same concerns. And I feel like even probably financial planning, they want to do what other people do they know instead of what might be best for them. I mean, plans should be tailored to you, not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And then I think that speaks to the financial and the legal aspect of it. There's, like we said, the different packages available. We see a lot of that. I want to do, my friend has it this way, or my coworker earned 20%. I only earned 15. Totally different set of circumstances, situations, time frame, goals. Like you said, stage of your life, all these things really matter. And I think it makes a big difference when you're trying to tailor a financial plan. And if you don't include the legal aspect of it, you could be missing the boat on quite a bit.
I mean, the one thing I've noticed with you is when you're talking to people about like what risks they want to take, and that also plays a role. I feel like that if people want more risk, they may get a higher return versus the person who wants to be safe.
Sure.
They shouldn't then be upset about maybe not getting as much return.
Right. Yeah. It's buyer's remorse almost. So, I want stability. And then, a year later, we're reviewing everything and, I only earned 7%, but the market earned 22. And I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but if the market dropped 22 and you lost 0, we'd be having a totally different conversation. You'd be jumping for joy right now. So, that's a good point, because I think it brings us to, we don't have a crystal ball. That's why we try to just plan and play the percentages and, I don't want to say take advantage of the laws, but utilize the laws properly to take advantage of any shortcoming that there might be.
Yeah. And one thing, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I feel like a lot of our clients feel like they're coming in too late. They come in, they're like, well, I probably should have done this 10 years ago, or I should have started thinking about this earlier on. Do you see that as well on the financial side, where people are like, I should have been going to an advisor from the time I was 20?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at our client base, I mean, we have a lot more clients in their 60s than we do in their 30s. So, I think the people that get started early are definitely doing themselves a favor, especially when you mix in getting an early estate plan done. And again, we're not talking about, doing the last estate plan that you'll ever do. You mentioned it. You update your estate plan and you add to it as you go. You take out what you don't need, you add what you might need. I think it's the same thing with financial. So, you're working through it across all these years, I think the biggest benefit here is you come to one place for it. It's not one person, but you still come to one place for it versus having to go to many different places. And like you mentioned, we talk to each other. That's a big benefit.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there too, that the earlier you start, the better it's going to be, because you're going to think about this for a longer period of time. You're going to have time for your money to grow. And you can start at any time. That's like the crazy thing is people are like, oh, that's a later in life thing. Well, your money's going to grow all the time if you keep it invested, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, it's not too early to get started. And again, we're a fiduciary on the financial side. So we that just means we do what's best for you. We're not here to, sling high commission products or anything like that. On the legal side, I've seen you and Chris, you guys work through the information. You're not looking to just sell somebody, quote unquote, sell somebody the highest price thing that we can. We want to do what's right for people and what's best.
Yeah. So that's where we see a lot of people, they're like, okay, well, this is what I want, but that might not be actually what they need. So we'll show them different options. I mean, here's this option, here's the negatives. Here's this option, here's the positives and negatives.
Right.
Because I want you to make the informed decision so you're not coming back in saying, well, why don't you talk about this? I'd rather you think what's going to be best for my family, what's going to protect them long term, and what's going to give me that peace of mind moving forward.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. At the same time, we're not just going to say, okay, if this is what you want, this is what you get. I used to have a sales manager once that would tell us, as advisors, we're not order takers. So it's our job to get you to your goals. We might be seeing something that you're missing out on. And that kind of runs contrary to what I said earlier about, we're not just going to do the most expensive thing, and we're not, but we're going to do the best thing, or we're going to recommend the best thing. We make recommendations. Of course, it's up to our clients for us to implement those.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing our clients do is they may come in and be like, okay, I already have this set up. What should I change? And we can sit down and walk through them, what these options are, and they may want to move forward with something different or not, but at least then they're aware of their options.
Yeah. Have you seen our YouTube channel? Our YouTube channel is
growing
views by the day.
You're gonna be popular here. You're not even gonna be in the office here seeing your YouTube popularity.
It's not just me, it's you, it's Chris. So I would encourage everybody to check us out. We have a lot more shorts up there now. The shorts seem to be really popular. I can see why. Honestly, I'll admit it. When I'm scrolling through YouTube, sometimes I check out shorts with the captions on them, and it's either funny or it's something you didn't think about before, but they're good because it's just a quick way to grab somebody's attention.
Yeah, and a lot of ours end up being a little bit of information that you may want to hear a little bit more about. And if you do ever, leave us a comment on one of these, and we'll make a video kind of tailored to what your questions are.
Yeah, definitely. So our YouTube channel, Brookside Financial, also at Anselmo Law, Facebook page, or you can do it the old school way. Give us a call, 440-886-3550. What's the Anselmo?
Anselmo is 216-485-1040.
1040, that's right. Or swing by. We get a lot of foot traffic here. It's a nice building, gotta say. All right, Zach, thank you for joining us today. That concludes this week's podcast on the road to retirement. Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.